Hello everyone. Welcome to today's lecture on degeneration and regeneration of nerve and the autonomic nervous system including memory in our nervous system module of introductory to animal physiology. Today we'll explore the fascinating processes that occur when nerves get damaged and their incredible mechanisms by which they can repair and regenerate. We also delve into the autonomic nervous system, examining how it adapts to injury and ensures the body's vital function remain regulated. Thank you for your dedication to understanding this complex system. Let's dive into the details and uncover the resilience of our nervous system. So, what is that degeneration of nerve fiber? The degeneration, whenever a nerve fibers get injured due to various reasons, some changes occur in the nerves. These changes together are called as degenerative changes. As I said, this degeneration happens due to many reasons or causes, you can say. The first important cause is that obstruction of a blood flow, because blood flow is one of the important medium where it carries oxygen to the nerve fiber. So when it get obstructed, then that results into the functional loss. The next is that local injection of any toxic substances, including any poisons or any type of chemicals that will causes loss of functions and then nerve damages. Then the third one is that crushing of nerve fiber. Many a times it happens when there is an accident or injury to the nerves. In addition to that, the last one is that transection of nerve fiber. Transection means it is cut. In simple way, we can say it is cut or severed. Okay, that means discontinuity. That means continuity of the nerve fiber is get stopped or cutted. Then these nerve injuries are broadly classified into two types based on Seddon and the another person is Sunderland's. These two persons described the degree of injuries. The Seddon's classification, he classified the nerve injury into neuropraxia, axonomesis, and then neuromesis. Whereas the Sunderland, he classified the degree of nerve injury into type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, and type 5. Before going into the classification, first you need to understand what are the different connective tissue layers which covers central nervous system as well as the peripheral nervous system. There are three important connective tissue layers are involved. The first one is called as endoneurium. That means this is the connective tissue layer which covers a single neuron along with the myelin layer. Okay. The next is that the perineurium, where the nerve fibers are grouped together and it is called as a fascicles. So here you can see in the image. And then the third one is epineurium. The group of fascicles are grouped together and covered by a connective tissue layer, and this connective tissue layer is called as epineurium. This is the outermost covering of the nerve fiber. Now let us enter into the classification. The first degree of the injury is also called as neuropraxia. That means now I am combining both the Seddon's classification as well as the Sunderland's classification. You can see in the before slide, right? So the second degree injury is equivalent to description of that axonomesis, where the Wallerian degeneration happens. Whereas in the first degree injury as well as the second degree injury, in both these conditions where there will be a temporary loss of conduction will takes place, and if we allow a sufficient time, then there is a recovery potential happens. But whereas from the third degree injury to the fifth degree injury, there will be an absolute loss of conduction, and there is a very minimal or there is no chances of regeneration at all. So here I have given you a chart which will covers almost all the types of classification and what are the parts, how extent it can be damaged in the nerve fibers. So in addition to Sunderland's and Seddon's classification, there are other persons also described the nerve fiber injury. So if you see the Berg and Boni, they classified the nerve injury into degenerative nerve fiber damage and then non-degenerative type. Okay, there is only two types they describe, whereas the Lundborg classification, if you see, he described into a physiological conduction block where it can be again subclassified into type A nerve fiber damage and type B nerve fiber damage, and then the next is that myelin damage, then axonal damage, then axon plus endoneurium. I told you what is that endoneurium. It is a connective tissue layer, right, that covers both axon as well as the myelin sheath. Then axon, endoneurium and perineurium damage, and then axon, endoneurium, perineurium and epineurium damage. See how extent the connective tissues layers are damaged. So based on that, this degree of injury also are classified, and based on this damages only, whether the nerve fiber can be regenerated or not, the potential for regeneration. Now Sunderland's already told type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, type 5. So if you see in relation with the Sedon's classification, the type 1, that is neuropraxia, then axonomesis, then type 3, type 4, type 5, it will be called as neuromesis. That means severe nerve damage happens. Now coming to the nerve conduction ability, as I told you that in neuropraxia and axonomesis, there is a chances of temporary loss of conduction, and if you give a sufficient time, then there is a higher chances of recovery. Whereas from the third degree injury, there is no chance of nerve regeneration takes place. As a result, one must be very much careful that this type of nerve injury should not happen. Now, so far I told several things about degeneration. So what is the degeneration? These degenerative changes are broadly classified into three types in general, but in some places you may find that there is one more type of classification, that is called as transsynaptic. In some books they describe this transsynaptic under the transneuronal itself, okay, but in some places the transsynaptic degenerative changes will be covered separately, right? So the first one is called as Wallerian or orthograde degeneration. So Wallerian or orthograde degeneration is nothing but this is the neuron, right? This is the soma, and then this is the axon, and then this is the axon terminal, these are the dendrites, right? So here, for example, there is an injury. So when there is an injury at this level in the axon, then the degenerative changes which takes place distal to the injury is called as Wallerian degeneration. So whatever the degenerative changes you will observe distal to the injury, that degeneration is called as Wallerian degeneration or orthograde degeneration. The next is called as retrograde. Retro means retrospective, you might have heard. That means you have to go back. So go back means what? This is the injury, the degenerative changes which you will see above, proximal to the injury, okay, above to the injury at the level. That type of degenerative changes is called as retrograde degenerative changes, the proximal. Mostly it takes place up to the first nodes of Ranvier. Then next is that transneuronal. Now one important point is that in retrograde degeneration you will find one important terminology called as chromatolysis. So what is this chromatolysis? Chromatolysis is nothing but it's a reactive changes that occurs mostly in the cell body, that means the soma of the damaged neurons, that involves in the dispersion and redistribution of the Nissl substance. So why this redistribution of this Nissl substance is taking place? Because when there is a degenerative changes, then when regeneration occurs, that time it demands a lot of proteins. So due to that reason, this Nissl substance must be redistributed properly in the soma, so that the proper regeneration and the demanded protein will be synthesized and then used for the regeneration purpose. Then next we'll come to the transneuronal. So transneuronal means in this four stages are there. Okay, the first one is called as axonal transection. So transection means, already I told you, this is nothing but the cut or severed end or damaged portion. Okay, so where the discontinuity takes place in the neuron, so that is called as transection. So there is a continuity is lost in the axon, that is called as transection, axonal transection. Then next is that it involves both anterograde as well as the retrograde degeneration, right? Then next will be the transsynaptic degenerative changes. So transsynaptic degenerative changes means, in this, the uninjured neurons which is present previous to the injured neurons, where the damages is get transferred or it is spreaded. Like this is one neuron, right? And this is another neuron. Now this neuron have some injury. Now it spreads the injury to this undamaged neuron. Okay, so this type of degenerative changes is called as transsynaptic. That means it is crossing the synapse and then it is spreading the injury to the next neuron. So that is called as transsynaptic degeneration. Then so far we so many things about the degeneration. Now let us go into the what is called regeneration. Once the neurons get damaged, that means it has to be regenerated. Now regeneration is defined as the regrowth of the lost or destroyed part of the neuronal tissue. That is called as regeneration. Now the regeneration to occurs, there are some important criteria are there. Remember that if the neuron won't satisfy this criteria, then there is absolutely no possibility of neuronal regeneration to takes place. Fine. The first important criteria is that the axon or the nerve fiber cut end should not, the gap between the cut end should not exceed 3 millimeter in size. If it extends beyond 3 millimeter, then the regeneration possibility is low or nil. Then the next important criteria is that neurolemma must be present. What is that neurolemma? Neurolemma means it is the plasma membrane of the neurons is called as neurolemma. So this neurolemma must be present. It must be present. Then the third important criteria is that nucleus must be intact. When there is a nerve injury, many a times the nucleus will be extruded out, but in that case there will be no possibility of the regeneration of the nerve fiber, damaged neuron, right? So nucleus intactness is one important criteria for the regeneration to occur. And the last one is that the cut end. Okay, whenever there is a cut is taking place, the severed, okay, transaction of the neurons is taking place, then the cut end should be aligned in the same plane. Okay, in case if the cut end aligned on a different orientation, then in that case the regeneration won't occur in the neuron. So the cut ends must be aligned in the same line so that the regeneration will take place. So many times in the surgical procedures, one surgical procedure is called as neurolysis. I can write here neurolysis. So in neurolysis, one important step is that they will try to align the neurons, the axons, the damaged neurons into this in the same orientation, the same line or the same plane, so that the regeneration will be hazel or the fastened, the recovery, right? In addition to this neurolysis, of course, neurolysis one step only I told. In addition to this neurolysis, nowadays the nerve grafts and then nerve damage repairs, many type of advanced treatments protocols came for the regeneration of the nerve fibers. The in short about the degeneration and regeneration of the nerve fibers. Now, let us go to our next topic, that is autonomic nervous system. So in the earlier lecture itself, I told autonomic nervous system. I have given some brief idea about the autonomic nervous system, which is totally controlling all the unconscious activity of the body. And then this autonomic nervous system is regulated or controlled by the hypothalamus. Don't forget this. Autonomic nervous system is controlled by hypothalamus. Even if you wake up from the this one, someone disturbs you during the sleep and asks who controls the autonomic nervous system, you must tell that it is controlled by the hypothalamus, right? So let us come to the ANS. The main function of the ANS is to maintain the homeostasis. How it is maintaining the homeostasis? By controlling the visceral as well as the glandular secretions. Now, the functions of the ANS we'll see. It regulates, I told you, all the unconscious functions of the body is maintained or regulated by the or controlled by the autonomic nervous system with the help of by the hypothalamus. So it regulates the heart rate, digestion, respiratory rate, salivation, perspiration, pupillary dilatation, micturition, and then sexual arousal. Of course, each and every of these functions have their own mechanism how the ANS is controlling or regulating these functions. But I am not going to tell all the mechanisms are discussed here. If you are interested, then you can refer some standard textbooks for understanding these mechanisms. Now, coming to the divisions, the ANS are broadly classified into sympathetic division and then parasympathetic division. The sympathetic division, mostly it is innervated through the sympathetic fibers, whereas the parasympathetic division, the innervation is taking place through the parasympathetic fibers. Then the sympathetic fibers originated from the thoracolumbar division, that means thoracic vertebra T1 to T13 and then lumbar vertebra, that is 1 to 3. From this the fibers are originated, the sympathetic fibers, the sympathetic division, right? Now let us coming to the parasympathetic division, where it is innervated through the parasympathetic fibers and it originated by the brainstem and the sacral cord segments. So that is why it is called as craniosacral origin. So craniosacral means brainstem is the cranium part and then sacral part, that means the sacral vertebra, that's S2 and S3, it's involved for the origin of the fibers of the parasympathetic division. Now, the function of this sympathetic division and parasympathetic division is totally opposite. So, and how will I remember the functions of the sympathetic division or the parasympathetic division? If you want to remember the sympathetic division of functions, then you need to keep you in a situation where you are under stress. Like for example, you are in the exam hall before receiving the question paper. So in that case, what are the different types of changes you will find in your body, right? These are all triggered by under the control of the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system. Whereas if you are at home, right, and it is a open book examination where your friends and books and everyone is there, in that case what you will do, you will be very much relaxed. So there the parasympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system get activated. From this itself you can understand that the sympathetic division mostly try to strengthen your body defense against the adverse conditions. Another way I am putting it in the other way, that it is strengthening the body defense against the adverse conditions. That is a function of the sympathetic division. So all the functions whatever we will discuss, it's all related with the adverse conditions, how your body is trying to cope, where it activates, this sympathetic division activates through the HPA axis. So what is this HPA axis? HPA means it is hypothalamus, then pituitary, and then adrenal axis. You know that adrenal gland, it is having two parts, one is cortex and medulla. Of course I am not entering into that. Adrenal cortex have three parts and then each one will secrete one hormones, right? And if you see the adrenal medulla where epinephrine, norepinephrine is released, right? So this hypothalamus, pituitary and adrenal axis get activated. As a result, the stress hormones such as cortisol, epinephrine or adrenaline, you can say, because it is secreted from the adrenal gland, that's why it is called as adrenaline. Then there is one more important, that is called as norepinephrine or noradrenaline. Okay, so adrenaline, noradrenaline and cortisol, these are the stress hormones, you can say, or the catecholamines. Now the parasympathetic division we'll see. Parasympathetic division, I told you are very cool, your body is not under stress. Okay, in that case the parasympathetic division is controlling your body, that means that is taking the upper hand. So it conserves and restores whatever the energy is expended or spent by the sympathetic division during the stress period. So during stress period the body's main objective is sustenance, okay, or survival. Whereas in parasympathetic division, during that survival, much amount of this energy is getting expended. So due to that reason, it is depleted. So some division, some mechanism in the body should take place to restore all those spent energy. That is called as parasympathetic division. That function will be done by the parasympathetic division. So this parasympathetic division, its function in simple way, it is called as rest and digest system. So if you remember this word rest and digest system, that is parasympathetic division's important function. Whereas sympathetic division, it is flight or fight mechanism. That's all. Next important aspect of the autonomic nervous system is the position of the ganglion. So this is a neuron, right? So here the ganglion is present. Then from here the next neuron will come, and then this is the target organ. Now there is one more where the ganglion will be present inside the target organ. Okay, so one is that where the ganglion is situated far away from the target organ, whereas in the another one the ganglion is situated just closer to the target organ. So based on this, the fibers are called as a preganglionic fiber and then postganglionic fibers, right? So at that ganglionic location where it releases the neurotransmitters, that neurotransmitters will come and bind with the postganglionic fiber and that innervates. So this story already we discussed how the synaptic transmission and all will takes place. That story will come here. Now the ganglion which is present located closer to the target organ is seen in the parasympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system, whereas the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system, where the ganglion is present far away from the target organ, right? And then what are the neurotransmitters it releases, whether it is a preganglionic fiber of sympathetic division or parasympathetic division. In both these fibers of the autonomic nervous, this one, the preganglionic fiber releases acetylcholine only. This is one important point you need to note, that the preganglionic fibers of both sympathetic division as well as parasympathetic division releases acetylcholine. Where the difference comes is that in the postganglionic fiber. So in the postganglionic fibers, the neurons used to release different types of neurotransmitters. Majorly in the adrenergic fibers or the sympathetic fibers, it releases epinephrine or norepinephrine, whereas the parasympathetic fibers releases acetylcholine. So when it releases, it is called as cholinergic fibers. When it releases adrenaline or noradrenaline, it is called as adrenergic fibers. So this is about the ganglion, this one. Next we'll see what are the important functions of the autonomic nervous system. So I told you that you are in the stressful condition and then you are at home without any stress. So when you are in stress condition, your pupil must be in dilated condition so that you can see, you can feel how the environment looks, how you can escape, and what are the different plans you can make it. So your pupil must be dilated. Then you should secrete a lot of mucoid saliva but not copious saliva. Copious saliva means it is watery saliva. Then heart rate will be increased, contractility also increases, bronchial also dilated, then digestion will be inhibited. Obviously you may not like to eat anything during stressful period, and your liver will be triggered to release lot of glucose. for maintenance of the survival. And then the bladder get relaxes, then rectum get contracts, then peripheral vasoconstriction will takes place. As a result, the blood will be diverted to the major organs, and then in the reproduction, the orgasm and ejaculation will takes place. So straight opposite to the parasympathetic division. The next important topic is that memory. So memory, what is called memory? Memory is defined as encoding, sorting, storage, retrieval and transfer of the experiences, concepts, sensory motor behavioral patterns which you acquired. So the first is that once you gain some sensory information comes, it will get encoded. Once it encoded, then it has to be sorted. Sorted means it has to be classified. Then once it is classified, it will get stored. The storage is of three types. One is that ultra short-term memory, then short-term memory and then long-term memory. Then apart from that, working memory, like that many classifications are there, but still you need to remember at least these three: ultra short-term, short-term and long-term memory. Then once it is stored, then it will, the information must be retrieved and it will get transferred. Formation of the new synapse or the consolidation of the memory process will take place. Now the memory is broadly classified into explicit memory and implicit memory. So the explicit memory is also called as declarative memory, and the implicit memory is also called as non-declarative memory. Then the explicit memory is further classified into episodic memory and semantic memory. So episodic memory is totally related with the events and the personal experiences. It is based on the events and the personal experiences. Whereas the semantic memory, it is totally related with the facts. And then this explicit memory, if you see, it is based on the availability of consciousness. Remember, this is very, very important. Whereas the implicit memory, it is not available on the consciousness. So whatever the memory you are gaining unconsciously, that is comes under the implicit memory, and conscious memory is comes under the explicit memory. Then in explicit memory, the question comes what? Okay, what it is, okay, where it is. So these all question comes into the explicit memory, whereas implicit memory, it comes how. Okay, so these type of questions comes into the implicit memory. Then implicit memory is broadly classified into three types. One is motor or procedural, which is related with the physical skills, habits, which are learned through repetitions. Next is that associate learning. The associate learning is further classified into classical learning and then the operant conditioning. One simple example I can say is that Pavlov's experiment, right? So the Pavlov's experiment comes under the associated learning only. Then the third one is called as non-associated learning. This includes habituation. What is habituation? When you are giving a stimulus, it results into the reduced response. When you give a same stimulus, that will leads to the reduced response is called as habituation. The next one is called as sensitization. Sensitization means it results into the increased response to any type of noxious stimulus, that is called as sensitization. So these are the comes under the non-associated learning. Then last one is that amnesia, which is related with the memory. What is this amnesia? Amnesia is nothing but it is a forgetting, right? So it is a deficit in the explicit memory, which is either loss of memory or loss of ability to recover, to recollect, right, whatever has happens. So this is defined as the amnesia is defined as like that. Now there is two types of amnesia. One is anterograde amnesia, another one is retrograde amnesia. Anterograde, we already seen the anterograde degenerative changes. It is anterograde, the same type only. Retrograde means it is back, whatever is you are forgetting the memories which is of past, that is called as retrograde memories. So this is of today's lecture. So what we have seen, nerve injury, what are the different causes, what are the degrees of injury and its types, then Sedan classification, Sunderland's classification, then what are the degenerative changes, 3 types, then Valerian, retrograde, transneuronal, transsynaptic changes, and then what is regeneration, what are the different criteria are required for the neurons to regenerate, and then ANS we started. So ANS, what are the divisions, ganglions, functions. At the end, we discussed about the memory, implicit and explicit, what are the different types in that, and then how this memory takes place. Mostly the memory will takes place when there is a good sleep, the consolidation process will be done. So that's the end of the today's lecture. Thank you.